Hi everyone. Welcome to the third week of TDEC's virtual summer camp. We're glad you're here. Today's activity is targeted at 6th through 8th grade, but we encourage viewers of all ages to follow along. Today is Food Waste Friday, so we are actually going to be learning about backyard composting. Composting is a great way to reduce your food waste that you produce in your own home while also creating a beneficial soil amendment. So let's get started.
So, what is composting? Composting is the accelerated and controlled breakdown of organic matter such as food scraps and yard waste that turn into a beneficial soil amendment. For composting to successfully occur, you only need four main things: your browns, greens, water, and air. The actual equation is 3 parts brown to 1 part green plus water and air equals compost. So let's get started. The first thing you will need to do is to select a composting location. At my house, it is around the back corner behind our HVAC unit so that it's not visibly seen, but it's still easy for us to access when we need to add our food scraps. The next thing you will need is an actual composting bin. So we have an earth machine, which I will show you in a little bit, but you don't actually have to have a bin like mine. You can construct something out of T-posts or chicken wire, maybe some old pallets that you have on hand, or you can just have a compost pile. You don't have to actually have a bin per se. You just need a location where you're going to be adding your browns and your greens. Next, you're going to need some sort of container to store your food scraps in. I have a container that I keep underneath my sink. It's a very easy location, and mine actually has a handle and a lid. I purchased this online, but it's not necessary to have something fancy like this. You can easily use a Tupperware with a lid or a mixing bowl. You can use a cardboard box or even a pizza box just so that you have something to hold your food scraps in until it's time to take it out to the compost. I recommend emptying your compost food scrap bin approximately every 2 to 4 days. You don't want it to start breaking down and getting sludgy in your bin before you have a chance to add it to your compost pile. So the next thing you'll need to do is to add your browns and your greens to your compost pile. Browns consist of things such as woody materials that you can find around your yard, such as wood debris, sticks, limbs, things like that. You can even use wood shavings or wood chips, like maybe old mulch. You can also use things such as dried grass or hay or even shredded paper. Greens, on the other hand, consist of things like your vegetable and fruit scraps, things like flowers. You can even do pet hair. I brush my dogs and put it in my compost pile. And coffee grounds and then breads and grains. All of those are great greens that you can add to your compost and also reduce your food waste. Food scraps and yard waste actually make up about 29% of what we throw away. So by composting your food scraps and yard waste, you're reducing landfill waste, which you actually also reduce greenhouse gas emissions. When things are in a landfill, specifically food scraps, they break down anaerobically, so they give off greenhouse gas emissions, especially methane. So when you are composting your food scraps, you're reducing methane from going into the atmosphere, which is a huge plus. So here's a look into my compost collection bucket, and here's some of my greens that I have on hand just from the week from food prep. So we have a carrot top, some eggshells, some avocado shells, onion peel, and an orange rind. So this is ready for me to take out and dump, which I will do in a moment. One of the most important things to remember is when you're adding your produce to always take off the produce label or sticker. I've gotten in the habit of actually removing them when I take them out of my grocery bag. If you don't remember, it's not a big deal. They won't break down in your compost, and you can pull them out before you add your compost to whatever it is you're going to use it on. But it's just always better to remember it up front because it's less work down the line. So another important thing about compost to remember is that when you're using it, it is not the same as fertilizer. It is a soil amendment, not a fertilizer. It has awesome nutrients and bacteria in it that are great for your plants and your soil. It also helps your soil to be able to retain and hold more moisture, which is also great for your plants. But it is not the same thing as a fertilizer. So after we've added our browns and our greens to our compost pile, we will stir them in, mix them in, and that's making sure that the air that we need gets into the compost pile. That way it doesn't get packed down and weighed down. You get air in there, which allows it to break down better. The other part of the equation, if you remember, is water. So I will show you outside how I water my bin, but it's always a good idea to make sure your pile needs the water before you water it. Make sure that it's, you want it to be about as wet as a sponge. So if it's already wet, you won't need to add any water. And in fact, I hardly ever add water. You just want to make sure that your compost doesn't get too terribly dry, because it can make it really hard for the little bacteria and insects in there that are helping break down your compost to live. The last two most important things that you need to do for your compost are to make sure the bacteria activity has diminished before you use your compost. So when you're composting, especially if you have a pile out in the open without a bin, you'll be able to see steam coming off of your compost pile. And that means that microbes are at work breaking down all of that goodness and turning it into your soil amendment that you need for your garden or your landscape. When the steam is coming off, that means they're still working. When you see no more steam, that means your compost is ready. When that happens, you always try to let it age for a little bit longer just to make sure. When my compost quits steaming, I will actually pick up my earth machine, move it, and start a new pile, and let that pile age for about 2 months before I use it in my garden or anywhere else. And that's really just a safety precaution to make sure that your compost is completely ready before you use it. So, now that we've been over the kitchen part, let's take a look out at my compost bin and actually show you how to add the greens and the browns. So here we are at my compost pile. Now this is an earth machine like I mentioned earlier. It has a removable lid, the actual bin for the compost, and a door on the bottom so that you can access your compost when it's ready. Now I've brought my food scraps from the kitchen and I'm going to add them so that you can see how I add my greens to my browns. I keep a pile of browns behind my compost bin so that they're always easily accessible when I need to add them. So next I'm going to add my browns. I have a pile of dried grass that we just cut, and they're going to make a great brown. I turn my compost with this spade. It's narrow and it's lightweight, so it's easy for me to use and get down into my earth machine. Other great tools are a pitchfork or even a hoe, maybe even a stick, just whatever you have on hand that can kind of help you turn around your compost. You're not trying to mix it together like if you were mixing a cake batter. You just need to stir it up a little bit so that air can get down in there and help the compost to really breathe. Next, if it had not just rained, I would add a little bit of water. But my easy method is that when it rains, I just take off the lid of my compost and let it naturally get watered. Another good way is to keep a watering can on hand, or you can locate your compost bin close to the water hose, as I have. Lastly, you want to remember to always put your lid back on to deter any pests if that is a problem in your area. Another great way to make sure you don't have any pests is to always cover your greens with your browns after you have added your food scraps.
Thanks for following along with our Food Waste Friday activity. We hope you learned a little bit about how to reduce food waste in your own home and some beneficial uses for compost. We hope to see you next week for the 4th week of TDEC's Virtual Summer Camp. See you then!